Started then. All right, we're going live, and we're definitely going live, and we're going extremely live because we have very interesting locations, very interesting time zones, and a lot of other things we're going to be talking about today. Welcome everyone to live stream number 80 of the Data on Kubernetes community. As always, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. If you are new to the Data on Kubernetes community, please check us out on LinkedIn, on Twitter. We're in lots of different places. We're also on Instagram. You can check us out there. But most importantly, this is your time to be sharing with us your doubts, your curiosities, your interests, etc. So please feel free to ask questions. You can always ask questions here in the chat. We can continue the conversation later on in Slack. Just a quick reminder, because I've been saying this a lot, we have our CFP open for our KubeCon co-located event. That will be on October 12th, and you are all invited. Registration is now open. But I'll leave the link here for the CFP in case you would like to submit a talk. If you want to submit a talk, just two basic criteria. It needs to be focused on running stateful workloads on Kubernetes, right? Databases, operators, all that good stuff. And we want it to be incorporating an end user focus, right? To avoid just strict vendor pitches, but those are the only two things we need to keep in mind. That being said, today I'm joined by two wonderful people that are very, very far away. Right? It is 8:30 in the morning here in Spain, and it is definitely a different time where the two of them are. Brad and Adam, can you just briefly introduce yourselves? Tell everybody where you're at and what we're going to be. I don't know, maybe a fun fact. Before we start getting into technical stuff, I'd like to know a fun fact about each one of you. So Adam, why don't you go first?
Also muted. I'm Adam Gardner. I'm day job is an automation architect at Dynatrace, and in my spare time and for fun, I guess you'd say, I help contribute to the Keptn community, which is what we're here to talk about today. Fun fact, you put me on the spot there. I do like scuba diving, as I put in my bio, and I guess the fun fact is, after 2 years of working remotely, I still can't figure out how to unmute myself on a Zoom call.
That's super funny because we were talking about that when we got started. We're talking, almost every day about, running data on Kubernetes, the Kubernetes ecosystem, but it's these basic, regular day-to-day technologies that seem to give us far more problems, and more difficulties to troubleshoot. So if there are any Zoom experts out there, there are lots of jobs waiting for you because these things are still giving us a hard time. All right, Brad, can you introduce yourself and let us know a fun fact?
Sure. So my name's Brad McCoy. I'm head of cloud engineering at Moula, and that's in Melbourne, Australia. I'm actually living in New Zealand at the moment though. And yeah, I'm here today. Adam's been mentoring me in Keptn. So we're almost doing a bit of a world tour around communities. So we're starting with DoK, which is my favorite one, by the way.
Oh.
And then the second one, we will go to the CNCF Islamabad.
Nice.
And then doing a bit of a world tour around the communities, talking about Keptn, learning a lot of cool stuff on the way, meeting some cool people. So yeah, it's good to follow us on the adventure. And fun fact, I've probably been in the DoK community for about maybe 8 months a year. Yeah. And Bart and I probably talk once a week. And this is the first time we're actually speaking or let alone video. So yeah, so it's really exciting to be here. And yeah.
For sure. Very good points. That's true. Brad is a DoK, is a DoK veteran. I mean, if we think about it that way, like we've been around for just over a year, and you've been very, very active. And I think it's a nice way to sort of show the spirit of community and all the different people that I've met because of you, people that we've interacted with together in the community. That's been very good. I will also say a fun fact about Brad. He has very good taste in music. Adam, we'll have to talk about your taste in music later on. But Brad's been giving some great references of bands that I definitely wouldn't have heard of. So that's always fun too. That's one of the nice things about community. It really is about the people, and just out of curiosity, how do you two know each other? I understand geographically speaking, you're relatively in the same neighborhood, but how did this come about?
Yeah, so Adam works for Dynatrace. I'm a big fan of Dynatrace as well. So we meet through mutual friends. They have a conference called Perform Go. So we met there, and then yeah, we're big in sort of the SRE space as well. So through mutual friends of Dynatrace, and then just now in different communities. So Adam's in Keptn, I'm in Ortelius, and we're actually looking at joining them together as an integration piece as well, which is quite exciting also.
Oh, very Very, very good. So during this world tour, there may be some exciting news of these things getting closer and closer together. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. One thing really quickly that you mentioned there, Brad, and both of you can kind of answer this as an intro before we get started. We're talking about SRE, like there's a lot of talk about SRE. There are books, there's groups, there's Google, there's this, there's that. And then also SRE being compared and contrasted with DevOps. So is one disappearing? Is one a person and another is a style? Is it a this or a that? How do the two of you explain it when you have to explain this to beginners? We can start with you, Adam, and then Brad, you can feel free to chime in.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually, because day to day, those terms are very fluid, and I find that they mean whatever people want them to mean in a lot of ways. People have sort of just given themselves SRE or DevOps title in the role, but yeah, I think the industry needs help defining that, but I think Brad would be the best one to. I mean, that's your role, isn't it, Brad? So it's an evolving space. Let's put it that way. It's fun.
But I think that's good, and also so that everyone understands that like how we're talking about it today. There are SRE principles. They talk about these pillars. We talk about things like that, but it is something that's still evolving. DevOps, you could say, is still evolving in some regard. Although it's something that we've been hearing more about, or we've heard about for a longer period of time. Yeah, but Brad, what would you like to comment on that?
I think in a lot of the Google books that they bring out, they say that SRE implements DevOps. So that's quite a big thing. If you Google that, SRE implements DevOps, and that will give you quite a good understanding of those differences of what those two are. For me, site reliability engineering, it's not about putting out fires and then not fixing the issue and band-aid fixing it. So it's about making tomorrow a better day. So the incident comes up, you see the incident, and instead of just fixing it, you're going to improve it so it doesn't happen again. So that's the difference. It's that automation, and that's where I see Keptn coming into that as well, because you'll notice there's a lot of, or pronounced Keptn, but it's almost like an automated engineer that's doing these tasks for you as well. So yeah, it's an exciting new space that, well, it's probably not new anymore, but there's a lot of opinion about it. And yeah, that's sort of my take on SRE. And I thought, just before we start as well, I think there might be a little bit of glossary. So we need to talk about SLAs, SLOs, SLIs. So they'll probably come up in today's talk. So SLA is the agreement you make with your clients or users. So let's say I'm going to tell the DoK community that my microphone will be 99% working on this talk. And then you have SLO, which is the objective your team must hit to meet that agreement. So Adam will talk a lot about the SLOs today, because that's a big part of the Keptn. And SLI is the real numbers of your performance, so the service level indicators. So if anyone throughout the talk needs a bit of us to explain that more, just please let us know, because if you're starting off, it can be a little bit confusing with all those S's going around.
for sure. I just put both the links to the SRE implements DevOps, as well as a brief guide about SLA, SLO, SLI. Yeah. But I definitely think it'll be important to sort of unpack those to get a better idea about what the differences are, why those are important as well. One thing is the what and the how, but also the why. So anyway, we can get onto that on the go. That being said, if you want to, I don't know if one of you wants to share your screen, we can start the presentation if you're ready.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Adam, you want to go?
Yeah, I shall. Okay, and the obligatory, let me know when you can see it.
Perfect.
Cool. Okay, so yeah, today we're going to talk a brief introduction about Keptn, pronounced Keptn, not Keptn. The reason it's called that is because that is the German phonetic pronunciation of Keptn, and sticking with the whole Kubernetes and containers and the nautical theme. The original developers of the project thought, well, let's stick with the nautical theme and call it Keptn. So I'm still waiting for my captain's hat, Jürgen. Just a shout out there, but there we go. So what is Keptn, and why would you consider using it. So as Brad said, and as I experience on a day-to-day basis, there are a lot of different ways to do things. And what we're trying to do is give you a helping hand, basically. So it's an event-based control plane, warning a lot of buzzwords in this. And I'll unpack these as we go through, but it's an event-based control plane for continuous delivery and automated operations. It provides DevOps and SRE automation for cloud-native applications. Again, as I promised, a lot of buzzwords. Basically, what that means is we're trying to build a tool that gives you sensible defaults and some core capabilities out of the box. So think about modeling pipelines. Think about how do I, between the stages of my, as my application goes from dev to staging to production, how do I ensure quality of those microservices? How do I prevent the microservice going from dev to staging or staging to production if it is not sufficient quality? How can I put a gate in there to actually prevent that? And once it is in production, how can I actually, if an issue does go wrong, how can I, again, have some sort of magic tool to roll that back if it goes wrong? How can I fix that application in production? So some of the guiding principles of Keptn are, it must be open, and of course Keptn is open source, but what we mean by that actually is that it's open to other tooling. Keptn isn't prescriptive, deliberately so, isn't prescriptive in what tooling you are using. You are going to be using your best fit tooling for whatever you and your company think. Keptn is not going to come across and say, that's wrong, you must use X, Y, or Z instead. In fact, Keptn does the exact opposite, and it says, bring your own tooling and we will work with it. Everything, again, must follow a GitOps approach, another buzzword, but basically what we're saying here is every change that Keptn makes must be stored ultimately in a Git repository as the source of truth. And as I've said, you'll see this later on, but we're going to give you some guide rails for DevOps and SRE in terms of sensible defaults for things, but also pre-built capabilities like the quality gates. So there are three core use cases for Keptn, and the first one actually starts before you've even onboarded your application. So you know, as a good engineer, DevOps or SRE engineer, you're going to need observability of that application. So Keptn will actually go ahead and set up your monitoring and observability for you. It will create all of the necessary bits of configuration. If necessary, it will create the alerts, it will create dashboards, so that when you do start onboarding your application, you have visibility on day one. The next use case is, as I said, kind of multi-stage delivery with these SLO-driven quality gates in between the stages. So the way this works is you tell Keptn what your environment looks like and what your service level objectives, as in my endpoint must, 99% of the calls to my endpoint must respond in less than 2 seconds or something. And then you give your deployment definition, as in what you're going to deploy through this multi-stage pipeline, and Keptn handles the rest. It will go and deploy your artifact. It will test your artifacts using whatever tooling you bring for testing, and it will stop that artifact if the artifact doesn't meet your quality criteria in between those stages.
Adam, really quickly, just a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at this topic of service level objectives, where do these come from? Are these things that are designed by an SRE team? They're designed together with a customer. They're designed by the CTO. Who are the stakeholders that are involved in designing those?
That's an excellent question. Usually a bit of everyone. They're typically technical. People start thinking they're technical metrics, but actually better quality SLOs really focus on the user contract, the user experience. So think front end. And again, there are books written on this topic, and there are whole conferences about SLOs. But if you're just starting out, think about what you're trying to achieve with that microservice. So if it's a shopping basket API, what are the common things that you want to achieve? Get the items in the basket, checkout, etc., etc. Start your journey there, and then expand from there. If you're starting with things like CPU and memory consumption, you're probably not in the right ballpark, if that makes sense, because they're important metrics, but they're not necessarily technical metrics because they don't necessarily correlate to a user impact. They might, but yeah, try and focus initially, at least, on the user impacting items.
Very, very good. Thank you.
Cool. So the third use case, as I said, now we're shifting into production. So imagine your microservice has made it all its way through the pipeline, and you're running quite happily. And then you have a problem. So two things you need here. You need an alert or a problem source from somewhere, and you need to provide Keptn with a remediation sequence. And basically that remediation sequence defines what happens when you receive this problem. So in this slide, what we've got here is a problem gets fed in from another system. Keptn will go away and say, okay, I have a remediation sequence that I have to trigger. So I know to trigger a scale up of the pods, for example. Then Keptn will wait a little while, and it will evaluate the SLOs that you've defined previously. And Keptn is basically with that saying, has the scale up fixed the problem? And if so, of course, everything is fine, the problem's remediated. And if not, what is next in my remediation sequence? Do I do another scale up event? Do I do something else? Do I escalate it to and create a ticket? What is the kind of workflow involved with that? So the idea here is that we're trying to automate problem fixes in production. So again, give humans bandwidth to actually kind of solve the really difficult problems. Any questions from anyone on those core use cases?
No, thinking about that once again is that in seeing this, I mean, and also just for a timeline's sake, how long has Keptn been going on as a project, and what have been the sort of learnings from seeing this? Because one thing is the initial idea of this is what we want to do, and then you start getting things on the ground and seeing how folks are reacting. How has that timeline worked out, and what have been the things, the core kind of we can say feedback that you've been getting along the go that's maybe helped you to iterate?
Yeah, we started. So the project started, I think, 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, and we started with we tried to be quite prescriptive in the way that we opinionated, I guess is the word. So we tried to say, right, this is how you should work. But actually the feedback from the community has been, that's great. And they're great for guide rails. So if I'm brand new, you can basically install Keptn in the demo mode, and it'll guide you to like a nicely set up system with your stages of your pipelines. And it'll suggest it'll guide you to good quality gates and good SLOs. But of course, everyone wants much bigger flexibility in that. So just in the latest release of Keptn 0.8, we've expanded that greatly so that you can basically create your own sequences, and you can really, really be flexible in what Keptn is doing and when it is doing it and how things are triggered. So that's kind of the biggest piece of feedback and change that we've had recently.
All right, perfect.
Cool.
Awesome.
So I said at the beginning that Keptn is bring your own tooling, and obviously that begs the question of, well, how does that actually work? How can we have such a flexible mechanism that allows just any tool to kind of plug into it? So there are three kind of logical layers to this. The Keptn control plane, which is kind of the central brains, is the API layer. It's all the, it holds the definition of the environment. And then on the right-hand side, you've got your tooling. So this is the execution plane, and this is where your tooling lives. Now that can be Kubernetes-based, of course, or it can actually be non-Kubernetes-based. So in that respect, if you had a service that was listening to the API, you can use this. You can use Keptn without Kubernetes. The control plane still needs to be deployed on Kubernetes, but the execution planes can live outside. But in any case, the glue that sticks these together are open source cloud events. So everything that happens in Keptn is basically a cloud event that gets triggered, and they have a certain syntax, and it is obviously sh Keptn event, whatever event triggered. And of course, there is a life cycle where the events say started, in progress, finished. So that's the responsibility of your services. So basically what happens is your services listen for these events, and they put their hand up effectively and say, you know what, I know how to do that. Let me go in and handle that event, and I'm going to signal back to the control plane when I'm done, and then Keptn can carry on its workflow.
Okay, real quick question, Adam. Someone in the audience asked, hi, can I replace PagerDuty with Keptn, or is the other story?
PagerDuty with Keptn, so yes and no. It's a bit. I would be using PagerDuty with Keptn, to be honest. What I would do there is have PagerDuty listening for. So I would feed my problem events into Keptn, and then PagerDuty becomes an orange box on this screen. It will be listening for those events. So Keptn will be orchestrating the workflow, and because what happens in the future if you change PagerDuty to something else, this model gives you that flexibility to just uninstall the PagerDuty service and install tool X.
All right, great, thank you.
So skipping back now that we've got a kind of view of how Keptn is working, the automated observability. That is the command that you run, obviously the Keptn CLI, to configure monitoring. So you say Keptn configure monitoring, Prometheus, Dynatrace, whatever tool that you bring. Again, we can work with any observability or monitoring tool. In the case of Prometheus, what Keptn will then go and do is start configuring Prometheus for monitoring services managed by Keptn. It will configure grabbing the alerts from Alert Manager, translating those alert payloads into the open source cloud events. It will then send those standardized cloud events to the Keptn API. And of course, it can then retrieve your service level indicators, as in your metrics. It can go and scrape them from Prometheus itself. So the next use case, the multi-stage delivery with quality gates. Basically, you start Keptn with a shipyard file. Again, staying with the nautical theme. A shipyard file defines your stages, and they are analogous to your pipeline stages, your sequences, which are broad sequences of tasks, and then obviously you have tasks. So this is an example of defining stages. It's just a YAML file. There's nothing magical there. So you can see I've got the dev stage, your stage, and then production. Then you can add as many stages as you like to define your delivery. Then you go in and add the sequences. So these, again, are broad sequences of things. So you might have a deployment sequence, for example. And then within the sequences, you have tasks. So task 1, task 2. So in my deployment, I might do generate some load, run a test, evaluate my deployment, and so on and so forth. They would be at the task level. So then we'll notice one thing, that in the shipyard file, we deliberately don't mention any tooling. We don't say, go and do a deployment with Helm, go and test with tool X. And that's deliberate because we want to separate those concerns. So the shipyard is purely about what you're trying to achieve, and then the tooling that achieves that comes later. And the tooling comes later by listening to those task events. So task triggered. So in this case, I have a stage called dev, my sequence is delivery, and my deployment task is the task. So as a human or a pipeline or via the API, you actually ask Keptn to trigger the dev.delivery sequence. And then Keptn will go ahead and go, okay, cool, I know what to do with that. I'm going to start the deployment task. And it is that task that your tooling listens for. And that's how you get the flexibility to change your tooling at will. Because if you no longer want tool A, you just uninstall that microservice and install a different one, and your shipyard and everything else stays the same. So what that actually looks like is something like this. You have the control plane sending out the deployment triggered event, and the Helm service puts its hand up and says, yes, I know how to do a deployment. And if you don't want that, you can, of course, just uninstall Helm and install a different tool. I thought there was a question there.
No, with that in mind, yeah, just quick question for the sake of being devil's advocate. Has it been no? It's always curious with tooling. Is that with using Helm? Have you tried it with another tool like Customize?
I haven't personally. I'm not sure. Someone in the community may have out there.
Yeah. No. Obviously, I know that Helm there's very, very strong support behind it. But just like I said, just for the sake of comparison, but like you said, if it seems to be available and flexible with that, then that should be more than enough.
Yeah. Okay, quality gates. This, to Brad's point earlier in the call, this is where we get into the technicalities of SLIs, SLOs, SLAs, and all that good stuff. So you need three things for the Keptn quality gates, and the quality gates themselves are actually pre-built into Keptn. So you get that kind of for free as you install Keptn. So the first thing you need is an SLI, an indicator provider, and that is basically where are my metrics coming from? So Prometheus, Dynatrace, whatever source the metrics are coming from. Then you need to tell Keptn how to interact or what those SLIs are. So in this case, we've defined two. We've got a 50th percentile and a 90th percentile, and you'll see here that this is Prometheus. This is basically telling Keptn how to retrieve those metrics from Prometheus. Now, of course, this will be different syntax depending on your tooling provider. Then you go ahead and create an SLO definition, which says, okay, in my SLO, I'm going to have, in this case, one indicator, my 90th percentile response time. Now, if Keptn, when you retrieve this metric, if it is less than or equal to plus 10%, and I'll come back to this in a moment, and an absolute value of less than 1,000 milliseconds, then for this metric, it's a pass. If it's obviously above 1,000 milliseconds and plus 10%, but less than 1,200 milliseconds, this SLI is in a warning state, and of course, above warning, it's failed. And you go ahead and you build up your SLO in that respect. So you would probably in reality have many SLIs in your SLO definition. Now, the less than or equal to 10%, Keptn keeps a history of every evaluation that it runs. And what's actually happening here is it's looking at the past previous 3 builds and averaging those results. So that's where the 10% comes from. It's basically looking at the previous evaluations and saying, if I'm within 10% of those, I'm within a pass criteria. Then what Keptn will do is it will go and it will give you a score for each SLI, and it will give you a total score for the build itself. So the build gets a pass, a warning, or a fail criteria. And by the way, when I say build, I actually mean evaluation. So you can run these evaluations on demand. And you get a pass, warning, or a fail, and you get a percentage. And here you see that if my total score for this evaluation is above 90%, then it's a pass. It's good enough quality to progress to the next stage. And then, of course, with that result, you can use that however you see fit. You can use that in other pipeline tools like Jenkins, or to progress the build or fail the build. And if you're using Keptn to manage your artifact, that is automatic. So if your artifact fails, of course, it will stop the artifact progressing to the next stage.
Real quick question here, just on the, once again, going to the subject of SLOs, SLAs, SLIs. Is it ever, might sound really silly, but, you know, from a customer perspective, would someone ever say, well, I don't want 99%, I want 100%. You know, why am I paying for something that you're telling me is going to fail with a certain degree of frequency? How do you package that and still convince someone that this is, you know, a valid technology?
If
I can take
like
that
anything, if you're, yeah, go for it, Brad.
So I've had this experience quite a bit, and it comes back to your maybe second question regarding who defines these SLIs, SLOs.
Yeah.
As soon as you start letting your customer do that, that's when you really get into trouble as well, because let's say, for example, you're going to say, I want to be 100%. Well, if my internet provider only says that I'm going to give your business, let's say 99.96, you can never be truly 100% available. So I guess a lot of it comes down to other factors that aren't your business, you know, like other providers as well. But the most I've heard for the SLA, I think, is on the Amazon S3 bucket, which is, I believe it's 99.9 and 8 nines or 11 nines of availability, which is quite crazy, of durability. I don't know if that answers the question, but
no. I think it's very helpful, because it's just you know, in particular thinking, you know, depending on the type of business, you know, classic examples of, you know, if you know, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Singles Day, these sort of, you know, peak times when, you know, there's going to be a lot of traffic. But like you said, what can the internet service provider say? What I'm also getting at here as well too is that while SRE is very much a technical role, this, you know, these key business concepts that have to be kept in mind, and obviously direct contact with the customer, and having, you know, one thing is to understand it, but another thing is the importance to be able to explain it, put it in simple terms, and show them what, because, you know, it's like, you know, why am I going to buy, you know, a product that you're telling me directly is going to fail? I guess it also just goes to show that very often in life, we're told that all of our products are perfect, when in reality, there will be some, you know, degree of failure. But 99% is still pretty good when it comes to reliability. Anyway, very good answer. Thank you, Brett.
I think also what you said regarding Black Friday, that's a really good use case for Keptn. So that closed loop remediation where Keptn will see the issue, and then it can actually remediate by, it can toggle a feature flag to say, let's say you do a crazy marketing campaign for Black Friday, you put strain on, let's say, database calls. Keptn can then, as a remediation process, it can remove that feature flag to stop that stuff as well. So that's actually quite a good use case for Keptn when you're doing like crazy marketing promotions as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good.
Good segue into my next couple of slides, Brad. Well done.
Well done, Brad.
So that's just on the screen there. That's basically a visual of the workflow here. So you are asking for an evaluation. Keptn will go away and grab the metrics from whatever tooling provider you bring, evaluate those SLOs and SLIs, and basically return a result. And you can then use that in however you see fit. So yeah, to your point, Brad, closed loop remediation needs three things: the problem event, of course, from Keptn itself or a third-party provider funneling in those events, and then you write a remediation action YAML file again, and basically this one is saying, okay, when I get a problem type of response time degradation. So when my response time degrades, what am I going to do about it? Well, I'm going to toggle a feature flag, and I'm actually going to toggle the feature flag to be off. So I'm going to disable that promotion because for some reason that promotion has caused an issue. And then of course you need a tool to actually kind of be able to action this, because Keptn itself isn't a remediation provider. So you bring your tooling, you bring whatever you want, ServiceNow, Unleash, Helm to scale things, or whatever tool you wanna provide. Again, the kind of workflow of that, you've got your incoming problem into Keptn's control plane, and this is kind of the PagerDuty aspect, is what I was picturing before. And then Keptn sends the action.triggered, so do an action, and the Unleash server says, yeah, I know how to do that action. I'm going to turn that feature flag off as an example. So with that said, that's the basics of Keptn, and I'll jump into the live demo. So everything about Keptn can be found on keptn.sh. And of course, I'm not going to go through all this, but you can follow these links. You can get started with Keptn. There's about a 3 or 4 line copy and paste install script, and it'll get you up and running. If you follow this link through, you basically get to this Keptn's bridge, which is the UI. And what you see here are 4 projects. So let's have a look at the Litmus project. So the Litmus project has 1 stage. Remember, the stages model your dev staging of production, but you can use that in any way you see fit. In this case, we've got a single stage that we're running chaos tests in. And if I flick to the sequences, first of all, have a look at one that passed. So what's happened here is someone or something has asked Keptn to start the delivery sequence. Now, if we, I'll just jump back quickly. You can see there's an upstream Git repo here, so I'll show you this. As I said, everything comes back to the shipyard file. So we have a single stage here called chaos. Zoom in slightly. And there's a sequence called delivery. And then there are a number of tasks, deployment with some properties, and then a test task, and then finally an evaluation task. So we, as humans, would say to Keptn, please, Keptn, start the delivery sequence in the chaos stage. And that's exactly what you're seeing here. And then Keptn says, yep, cool, I know how to do that. I'm going to start the deployment. And again, there's no secrets. Keptn sends the open source cloud event, which is basically a JSON payload. And the event type is deployment triggered. And if I drop this down, you'll see that actually the Helm service is listening for that deployment triggered event. The Helm service has put its hand up and says, yep, I know how to do a deployment. Let me go away and do that. And then Helm comes back and says, yep, I'm passed. I've successfully deployed your artifact. Then flick back to the shipyard file. So we're done with the deployment. What do we do next? We do the test. So Keptn automatically knows to trigger that test.triggered event. And what happens there? Some other tooling puts its hand up and says, I know how to do a test. I know how to respond to that event. And in this case, 2 services have actually put their hand up. So you can have multiple services listening for the same event. So you can build really, really complicated workflows with any tooling that you provide. In this case, Litmus and JMeter have put their hand up and said, I know how to do something here. And JMeter starts a performance test, as does Litmus. Litmus Chaos starts a chaos experiment, and then they finish. And then again, following back to the shipyard, we now do the evaluation task, and that is a kind of built-in task in Keptn, as I say, to do the quality gate evaluation. So the Lighthouse service is something you get out of the box with Keptn, and it basically, that's what does all of the work. And there we see the get SLI, and there's the Prometheus SLI service going and retrieving the metrics from Prometheus. And what you get at the end of this, you can see the evaluation in this case passed, and we got a score of 100%. If I flick into the nice UI for the evaluation and scroll down, see, these are my metrics that I'm looking at. These are the values that we pulled back out of Prometheus, and these are the criteria. So any metric less than 200 milliseconds in this case is a pass. And of course, we met that. So we passed and we got a score and everything was good. So here you're seeing a history of every evaluation that Keptn has run. You see the result of each individual SLI. So one SLI can fail and one can pass, but then, as I say, Keptn will sum that up and give you an overall score for the build. And so as a tooling would usually respond to this event. So to progress or fail the build, you'd be looking at the total score. But as a DevOps engineer or as a developer, you probably want to know, well, how is my metric on this evaluation? So, and you can see that as well. In this case, though, everything was good, everything was green. So we pass the build, and that's why everything's green. If I flick back to one of these sequences that failed, doesn't mean that Keptn failed. It means actually, you see the 0 here, the evaluation failed. And I can jump into here and see exactly why the evaluation failed. And in this case, both of the metrics didn't meet my quality criteria, and therefore the evaluation failed. So that's Keptn in a nutshell with the quality gate evaluations. Were there any questions in the chat bar?
Oh, I had a couple of questions in terms of installation, getting everything running. Particularly we're thinking about people that are getting started out. Obviously, there's a community to support this, so if people have doubts, they can address that there. What seem to be some of the common challenges that people have when starting to work with something like Keptn?
Brad, you've
I suppose this is
getting involved in
exactly.
Keptn.
I suppose this is where Brad's experience is going to be very relevant, right? Brad, because can you just tell us about when you started using it and the things that you found, or perhaps that you didn't take into consideration, or different experiences that you've had with other kinds of technologies? How's that been for you?
Yeah, I guess when I started, I deployed it with Argo CD, and then I guess one thing is Keptn's quite CLI focused, so I would almost like it to be a little bit more declarative. I'm not sure if that's on the roadmap, but I found that I was, generally I like to have everything defined in Git, but I found that I was using the CLI a little bit, not too much, but I guess there's a little bit of CLI work in there as well. But apart from that, it's really, really good.
Okay. So you would say that, maybe for folks that are new, digging in a little bit to some CLI research beforehand would be worthwhile.
I guess I'm not saying that like the CLI is really good. I would just like to, if it was like a Kubernetes object where you can just deploy that YAML for everything instead of having to run the CLI sometimes. Maybe you even can, but I felt that there's a little bit of CLI work in there, but I'm sure that's on the roadmap to give you both options in a declarative way instead of imperative.
And also, Brad, from your perspective, imagining that something like Keptn didn't exist, what would the current situation look like in the sense of the amount of time, the questions of coordination, the processes that are simplified by Keptn? I know it might be difficult to quantify an exact number of hours, but how would you imagine that?
Yeah, I think you almost can quantify at least maybe not the hours, but the percentage. If you look at the Puppet, I think, State of DevOps report that just came out really recently, that will tell you a lot about what organizations are facing, like what problems they're having. And they talk about percentages around downtime, fixing issues. Keptn will really help those values go down. So in terms of, it just really gives you that automation and not having to manually, ring some up in the middle of the night, and it takes them a while to sign onto the computer and find these issues. It's really good to automate those issues and that remediation.
Yeah, it's one of the things, and when we hear names, things like PagerDuty and stuff like that. In the past, working very closely with DevOps teams, not being on one myself, and one of the major things is, okay, I have 2 phones, and it's not because I'm a drug dealer, it's because I'm on call, and so there are different things there. One thing is the technological factor, but then the other thing is, if you had it 3 a.m, you've got to wake up and you got to start, addressing something on unlimited, amount of sleep, and how you're going to be able to calculate things. Having something that's simplifying those processes, I think, obviously, is doing a great deal of good in a technological as well as in a human sense. I imagine that both of you have probably spent late nights working on things, and plenty of horror stories to go around with that at the most inopportune times when things happen. But whether it's Christmas or New Year's or any one of these other special days, people have to be monitoring that, and perhaps at those times even more, when there's classic example talking about downtime and also chaos engineering is a Netflix example where I believe it was Christmas Eve. It shut down, all of a sudden everyone has to talk to their in-laws. It's like a terrifying experience. So, but like I said, there's a very good, reason behind why these things need to be reliable, and hence the name Site Reliability Engineer. One thing I want to take this a little bit is that in our community, a new role that we're seeing more and more is the Database Reliability Engineer. Do you feel that a lot of these principles, in terms of the pillars of SRE, when we talk about observability metrics and things of that nature, and also SLOs, SLIs, SLAs, also will be applying to? There is a book about DBRE. I haven't read it yet. I know I need to. But do you imagine that there will be a similar sort of approach on some things, albeit we're dealing with separate stacks in some cases? What do you think about that?
I actually went to a DoK talk on that. So I think his name was Patrick.
Yes.
The last KubeCon.
Yes.
Talked exactly about that. Yeah.
This was not planned, by the way. I'm not paying Brad to say that, but yes, it's true. Yeah.
Yeah, because I actually listened in on that, because that was one of my my interests, and I think we should post a link for that, because he described that very, very well. I think I even commented on it after he finished it. That was a really good talk.
Yeah.
But the answer is yes. I see that that SRE getting into that data space as well, and especially when we're doing, we're hearing all these names like data ops, ML ops. It's really starting to integrate or shift left, if you like, into those other teams, which is really cool to see.
Yeah. No.
So you can start seeing the team topologies where, instead of having a traditional just a data engineering team, you'll have one DevOps engineer on the team, a data engineer, and you're doing more like domain teams opposed to just traditional use of the data guys. You sit down on that side of the office. So it's really good to see the collaboration in those teams and the new ways of working. Yeah.
No, and I just linked the talk that you mentioned, which is called From DBA to SRE, showing that journey of going. And so that's the thing, is like there is a technological side. There's also the responsibility side. There's the other part of it as well too that I can't stress enough, is working with customers and having to take that into account. And it's something that I don't want to say that it isn't for everybody, and it's something that can be learned, but it's something that's not something that's probably going to appear in some kind of a technical certification. I think it's something you learn with time, and there are all different kinds of customers with different ways of looking at things. That's why asking some of those questions like, why can't it be 100%? I'm paying how much am I paying you? Like this kind of mentality that'll come up. Going back to Keptn, just a little more background about the team of people that are working on this, because I think it's always really nice with open source projects to understand more about the makeup of the folks that are working on this and that are adding value, that are making Keptn what it is. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, Adam? Obviously, we had Jurgen on, big shout out to him. But the other folks that are on there, what kind of backgrounds do they tend to have? What's the kind of like the sort of balance that you have there?
Yeah, so it originally came from people like Jurgen and Andy Grabner, and but now really it is open source. It's across the world, and one of the core Keptn contributors remain people like Jurgen, been there from the beginning, really understand the core concepts of what the core of Keptn is. But as you've seen, the key part to this is that we encourage people to bring their own tooling. So, for example, I have written the Jira service that hangs off the side of Keptn. So anyone can contribute their service and their tooling, because that's the whole point. No one can be an expert in every single integration of every tool. So it's really interesting to see the breadth of ideas and the breadth of other tooling that people are bringing. Brad, you mentioned Argo. We've seen Litmus. We've seen K6 getting involved. There's a lot of good stuff going on.
Yeah, I think that really provides a really healthy mixture with different perspectives. My question here as well, is that something seen in other open source projects where they say bring your own tooling?
I think as we move into more event-based architecture, with microservices over monolithic, I think it's going to become a trend. So I would start to see more open source tools actually, like we have Argo events. We see that as being quite a trend at the moment. So I would say, yes, definitely there'll be more bring your own tools for sure. Because a lot of people don't want to reinvent the wheel. They know that, one tool, is very good. Why should we try and pretend that we can make that? And we're seeing this. That's the great thing about open source. It's this this collaboration, this integration, and we can do whatever we want because we have the code. It's really good.
No, I think it's a great point. And also as well, and I've told this story like 5 million times, sometimes when people because of having so many different tools, I think it kind of makes people open their eyes and see from different perspectives. We actually had a live stream this week that was just about tooling, but the speaker prefaced it by saying, I'm looking at this very much from someone who's very passionate about GitOps. And so my background and my way of looking at things, my objectives, thinking about that, the things that I'm going to be looking for are going to be based on this sort of way of looking at things. And obviously other folks are going to have a different strategy. I think what I've also find interesting about tooling, and precisely what came up in that session, was the emotional attachment that sometimes goes onto tooling, and seeing very large battles in organizations about whether it's this one or that one. And sometimes that can be about internal power struggles and things of that nature, because at the end of the day, I mean, they're tools and they can be very nice, but I don't want to say they're just tools because people have worked very hard to create them and things of that nature. But it is quite strong. So I think it's very healthy, and once again, open source environment where that provides that freedom, as you rightly said, for people to be able to interact with each other there. I guess next question, what's next on the roadmap? And you'll probably get asked this a lot in your Keptn Roadshow, but in your world tour. What's next on the roadmap for Keptn?
So split that into two kind of sides to this, the core and then the tooling. So the core will be expanding the ability to further split out the control plane versus the execution plane. We want to give people the biggest possible flexibility to bring their own tooling and use that however they see fit. So is that one execution plane? Is it multiple execution planes? What events can you listen for? More flexibility around that. And then the second part is I'd very much encourage, to your point of, I'm from Dynatrace, we have a monitoring and an observability slant to our thinking. So the more viewpoints we can get of what else can we do with Keptn, what other tooling can we bring to the mix, how can we push the envelope, in terms of what other tooling can we bring to the mix? What other things can we achieve with this idea of splitting tooling versus process? Really, I'd encourage you to get involved and push the boundary on this in terms of the other tooling.
And someone has asked a question about how, because you did comment on that, but keeping in mind the other established DevOps automation tools, is there anything that's kind of like, well, we see where this is going, so we want to keep that in mind so that we don't lose a competitive edge? Is there anything in particular that has come up along the way, or that you're keeping in mind for that roadmap?
I'm probably not the right person to ask about that. Someone like Jürgen or Andy Gardner would be the best person to ask about that, to be honest. So I'll abstain from that answer.
Well done. No, and it's not your job. Like you said, maintainers, they're the ones that need to have that kind of a vision. And I will say this as well for the person who asked that. Jürgen's very accessible. He's a very nice person. You can feel free to ask him directly. He's not gonna. He'll definitely. I'm sure it's something that he's thought about more than once. So yeah, it's normal. At the end of the day, there's a very, very large ecosystem with lots of different tools that are out there. Good. One other thing that I wanted to ask, because of doing a little bit of research, and this is always fun, is that I found out that Adam studied music production. Is that correct?
Where'd you dig that one from?
Your LinkedIn is very revealing, I must say. No, but that's cool. The thing is, and we'll have to talk about this a little bit later, because the CNCF Cloud Native TV going to be starting a program called Artist Code, where we're going to be interviewing different people that work in tech, but also have some kind of an artistic interest, whether it's music, art, painting, cooking, dance, doesn't matter. Just curious, is that can you tell us a little bit about that? And in any way about things that you learned in music production, how you've applied them in your job? And if there's anything as well too about maybe something that's relevant, even in this case of Keptn, if you could just share a little bit about that.
It was a long time ago. Well, put me on the spot there. I think working with people, that's the biggest thing here, because obviously, unless even if you're an electronic artist, but as soon as you get in the studio with a band, or there's a lot of different opinions, there's a lot of different viewpoints, and they're not all right, they're not all wrong, and usually the best idea is actually, a combination of all of it, and that has transferred into my job, my day-to-day job, but also Keptn. It's to kind of hark back to what you were saying before about politics and about tooling. We're actually running something at the moment where Keptn is responding to an event, but they have two tools responding to the same event, and they're basically doing a POC. They're saying, okay, fair enough. There's internal politics about these two tools. Run them both, and we'll see which one's better.
Yeah.
And then they can make that fair, informed decision about which one they go for. But I think collaboration is really the key, and that's what excites me about the open source community. Is there's just so many enthusiastic people who have ideas that you've never even thought of.
Yeah.
That you go, yeah, that's cool. Let's try that.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful answer. And once again, this was not planned. All right, I just was researching a little bit on Adam's LinkedIn, but I think there are several things there that you touched on that are very valuable, and also collaboration can be difficult, and also very often involves putting biases aside and trying to empathize with another person, see where they're coming from. Also being clear about we're talking about bands, like having been in bands, and I haven't continued with any of them. They've all stopped for whatever reason. But sometimes it's the right place but the wrong time, or the right people, but the mixture doesn't work out, or someone ends up having different plans. There are lots of different things that happen, and also being clear about your objectives. Some people just like the idea they're with a group of people, and that's fine. And also in open source, like, there are tons of different ways to contribute. And I always tell people, being a friendly person is the easiest way to get involved in open source. And also when you're dealing with folks, just in Keptn, you probably have people in lots of different time zones, which makes your calls probably very interesting, or that you have to duplicate it anyway, but that's sort of the nature of it. So I think there's a lot to be learned from that. That's good.
I found the Keptn community really welcoming. Everyone will, when you join, it's like the DoK, they'll reach out and say, hey, welcome. glad you're here. How can we help you? They have the help channel. They're really keen to help you learn as well. So it was a nice experience.
Very, very good. So Brad, are you going to start a band with Adam?
We could. We
could.
could for the world tour. Yeah, we could learn.
I'm saying a world tour needs a soundtrack. A world tour needs a soundtrack. And Adam, when you were studying music production, was it for electronic music? Was it traditional recording? What was it?
It was music production, so it encompassed both. My background is electronic stuff.
Yep.
But I remember the first day we got put into the studio, not the studio, the kind of the rehearsal room, and the guitarist. I'm not singling out guitarists here, but the guitarist is just like, turn that up to 12, and away I go. And I'm like, so are we recording you or are we recording the band? And he's like, just record me. And that was like my first day of, as you say, collaboration and listening to people and just de-escalating that and going, well, what about these 4 other people over in this corner? Yeah, that was good fun.
No, and that was before the singer arrived, and then it went up to 13 instead of 12. So no, that's As a guitarist, I can understand that, but I think there's a lot to be said for that, and also Brad, with what you mentioned about the very welcoming nature, and and also once again these troubled times we're going through, a little bit of kindness goes a very long way. I think it's very refreshing. So that's why these open source spaces make it so easy for these ideas to just start, operating and gaining traction. Before we finish, Adam, can I ask one other question? Is there anywhere we can find recordings of your music?
No.
That means yes. That means I've got a job for the rest of the day is to find Adam's music. Now, I encourage you at some point on your world tour to re-release a track. That could be fun to get to know the other side of Adam. Hey, that's okay. But
what do you play, Brad? By the way.
No,
yeah,
I can't play. I can't play.
But he can sing. He can sing and he can rap. He's very talented. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. We can work with that.
He has good taste in music, and I think if you don't have good taste in music, you're probably not going to be a very good musician, or you could be a good performer. But in the sense, like, I think also it's interesting is that the more music that you listen to, or like the more tools that you interact with, the broader your perspective gets, and you really get enriched by that. And so I try not to think that there's any particular kind of music that like I will never listen to. There's some that I might prefer more than others, but I think every kind of music has something to offer you. In the same way that a tool, whether you like it or not, there's something good in that. So try to find that, and don't just harp on something because either it's popular or it's not popular or things like that. I think there's definitely something you can learn. So I'm looking forward to the next steps on the world tour, as well as the next steps for what's going to be going on in Keptn. If you want to get involved, it's really easy. All right, Adam already mentioned it. Jump in the Slack, introduce yourself. I'm sure they've got first-time issues that can be tackled as well, and also just to go to the meetings to get familiarized. It's not a huge commitment, as we said. Just being friendly and ask questions. People like that, and you may have new questions that will help them keep things in mind. So yeah, I think it's quite easy to get involved. Adam and Brad are also easy to find on LinkedIn. We'll be posting this as well as a follow-up. So plenty of opportunities to get involved. Gentlemen, I wish you the best of luck on your world tour. Adam, wish me luck as I try to find your music. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to see each other sometime in a KubeCon in the US, sure. In Europe, in Australia, and New Zealand. And anyway, I hope you both enjoy the rest of your day as I am starting mine. Thank you very much. It was great having both of you here.